I started to talk about this. So we come into marriage and we got all these parts, right? We got his family, we got her family, we've got his idea of marriage and her idea of marriage, right? We've got her parents' marriage, and we've got his parents' marriage, and sometimes those are broken marriages, and all the parts and pieces from that, and so we have all these pieces. And if you're like me, you know, I woke up the next morning after our wedding, and it was the first day of our honeymoon, and I looked over and I went, oh my goodness, I'm married. For life, right? And I said that internally, but Laurie woke up and went, oh my goodness, him, right? And so, so we come in, we got all these pieces, but it's kind of like going to IKEA, right? You look at that dresser and it looks so good and you go, yes, I want that dresser and I want it to look just like that. And you get home, right? And you start spreading out all the pieces and you realize like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into, right? How many of you are like me? They tell you to take all the parts and make sure you have all of them. You're supposed to line them up and make sure you have them. And you're like me and you don't ever do that. Right? And you get done, it's missing like 3 pieces, and you're like, right? And it's like the inside pieces, and you're like, what? So you're like wood gluing stuff, right? Trying to hope that it's going to stick together. And sometimes, if we're honest, that's a lot how our marriages look. We got all these pieces, they're kind of spread out all over the place, and there's a big sign that says, some assembly required. And you're like, no, that's a lot of assembly, right? And so we begin to put the pieces together. We begin to put the pieces together. There's a quote that says this. It says, if you're wrong and you shut up, you're wise. If you're right and you shut up, you're married. Sounds about right, huh? So, do you know the statistic now, and this statistic has been true for about 15 years now, that more than half of marriages end in divorce today in America. Every time I stand in front of a couple and they say, I do, I will, I promise, with God's help, I kind of sit there in my mind and I go, I wonder, and I come back 2 years later and they go, well, it just didn't work out. He wasn't what I thought he would be. She wasn't the same when we got home. All the pieces, there was just too many of them. It was too much work. We gave up. Let that sink in for a minute. More than 50% of marriages end in divorce. So what that means is that we have broken trust, broken promises, broken hopes and dreams, broken relationships, broken families, broken lives. It's no wonder that so many young people today are waiting to get married, because they're the product of these broken homes, broken lives, broken marriages. They go, you know what? If that's what marriage is, mom and dad ended that way, then you know what? I'm not willing. I've gone through the hurt and the pain of theirs. Why do I want to put myself through the same hurt and pain? I mean, why would I sign up for something that has such a great percentage of ending in tragedy? And so, in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, Paul begins to unpack this idea of marriage. Paul begins to give Christ followers instructions on what a marriage should look like. Now, there's some that would argue that Paul has no right to give advice on marriage because Paul was a lifelong bachelor. Paul never got married. And so they say, how can someone who's a lifelong bachelor be giving us advice on marriage? And so they want to just back off from it. But I would remind those folks that Paul was taken into the third heaven. I mean, Paul not only had a Damascus Road encounter with Jesus, Paul was actually taken to heaven. He had either a vision or a dream, or he was transported into the presence of God. God had given Paul some very, very specific skills that qualify him to, and it's why even the disciples, the early disciples, Peter quotes Paul. He talks about Paul's writings. They were already using Paul's writings in the first century of Christendom. And so Paul begins to write this, and here's what he says in Ephesians chapter 5. Did everybody get notes? I messed up things on the first service, so I want to make sure everybody who wants to has notes. So it says this. He says, imitate God. Now think about that. That's the first part. Paul begins to talk about this whole idea here, not just marriage, but how we're to live. Paul starts off by saying, imitate God. Therefore, in everything you do, and he doesn't just leave it like that. You ever tell your kids to do it because you told them so? Paul doesn't leave it like that. He says this. He says, because you are his dear children. Because you're his children, and because you're supposed to be Christ followers, and because God's supposed to be the center of what you do, you should strive to imitate him. You should work at being like he is, being transformed by his very nature as you imitate him. That's how he starts this thought. Then he goes on to say this. He says, live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. Now, this begins to outline a bigger thought that Paul is going to make throughout the book of Ephesians. And then the last part of this chapter, Paul begins to talk about marriage. But he starts everything from this idea. Imitate God, follow Christ, because you are his children. Everything Paul is about to say and the rest of this chapter flows from this thought. And can I tell you, I've titled today's message, When Love Dies. And I think that love dies in marriages especially. Love dies in general terms, but love dies in marriages when we fail to imitate God and we fail to live lives that are filled with love. Our marriages fail because we stop trying to imitate God. We begin to want what we want, our desires. Why am I not being fulfilled? Why is he? Why is she? Why am I? And we forget that our command in every part of our life is to imitate God. So here's what Paul does in the rest of the chapter. I'm going to just summarize it for you. He gives us 4 instructions. In verse 1, we saw this. He says that we are to, in verse 1, that we're to imitate God. Be Christ followers. Be God imitators. In everything you do, strive, work at, live out, work towards imitating and being like God. The scripture that says, be holy as I am holy. Now, are we going to be as holy as God? Obviously not. But you know what? We strive for it. We hope for it. We work towards it. We do everything we can. How do we do that? By imitating God. What would God do? Second thing he says in verse 10, he says, determine what pleases the Lord. Now, if we're going to imitate him, right, we need to know what pleases him. We need to know what makes God happy. I know my life is a lot better when I do the things that please my wife, right? Happy wife, happy. Just yep. He didn't even say yep. Okay? Same thing your wife says about you. When my husband's happy, the house is better. Life's good, right? He's not on a rant. Okay. One step too far there? Determine what pleases the Lord. Then I love what he says in verse 15. He says, so be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. In other words, you got to stop and say, what's the wise thing to do? It's not always just what's the right thing, okay? But sometimes it has to go deeper than that. Laurie and I were driving the other day, and we had a financial decision we had to make. And we just both kind of stopped and looked at each other and said, what's the wise thing to do here? Is this an expenditure that's wise, or is it just an expenditure that is self-serving, it looks good, it makes sense for right now, but is that the wise investment? Is that the wise thing to do? What's the wise thing to do? Paul says, don't live like fools. Fools just go in and do, you know what, feels good, makes sense. I'll say that. I'll make that joke. I'll act like that. I'll do what pleases me. Paul says, stop, okay? When we're talking about our relationship with God and our relationship with others, don't act like fools, but live like those who are wise. And then finally, the fourth thing, he says, submit to one another. Now this begins this overall passage. Paul's transitioning into husbands and wives. And he starts this next section by saying, submit. Now we jump down to the next couple of verses. A lot of sermons have been preached about wives submitting to their husbands, but we forget that Paul talks, first of all, that we are to submit to one another. Paul says, if you're going to please God, if you're going to do what's wise, if you're going to be an imitator of God, start off by submitting to one another. We demonstrate our love for God, right, by how we treat, respond, care for one another. And this is what Paul says. The whole thing is building up to this thought right here. Mutual submission. Paul begins this instruction for husbands and wives talking about mutual submission. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to unpack this whole thing this morning and what mutual submission looks like. So, we're going to do this by looking at 3 L's. I'm just going to go through these and then we'll unpack them. So, let me give them to you foremost, okay? Right off the bat. The first L, look out for one another's interest. If we're mutually submitted to one another, then we are looking out for one another's interests. That's where it starts. Second L in mutual submission is listen to one another, or listen to each other. Now, we know there's a difference between hearing and listening, right? Great illustration of that the best illustration I ever had was when my daughter was little. I was sitting on the couch. I was probably watching a Yankees game or something, and she was chattering away, blah, 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 and I'm going, yeah. And she grabs my face, and she turns it towards her, and she says, Daddy, listen to me with your eyes. Right? There's a difference between hearing and listening. The second L in mutual submission is not just hearing one another. There's a lot of talk going back and forth, but are we listening to one another? The last L in mutual submission is love the other more than yourself. Now, this can be a hard one because we can look at it and we can go, well, you know what? I mean, I'm married, so obviously I love them more, but let's back up a little bit, okay? If you're really honest and you look back, if you've been married for a while, if you look back to the beginning of your marriage, you got married for a lot of selfish reasons. The beginning of your marriage, right? Let's be honest. Okay, we don't have a lot of kids in here, so let's, first of all, you wanted mommy, daddy time, if you know what I'm talking about, okay? Especially if you were a Christian, right, because you waited, or something like that, okay? 2, you're like, you complete me, honey, right? You wanted, a lot of us want companionship. So we get married because we want companionship. And everybody knows that you love each other, so it's going to last forever. Love just conquers everything, so you're good there, right? If you're really honest, there's very little at the beginning of your marriage that was about them. It was a lot about you. Now, those 2 lives, they blend and they become, and hopefully you're becoming more blended and more one, and you're loving them more than yourself. But you know what happens? You know when they come to my office? And here's what they say. They go, well, he's not doing this, and he's not doing that, and she's not fulfilling, and she's not, and hear what's happening there? I'm not getting what I thought I deserved out of this. And so I want out of it now. We're supposed to love the other more than ourselves. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So we're going to break down these 3 areas this morning, and I have a very special guest. I'm going to invite my wife to come up and join me this morning. So this is where the good, the bad, the ugly comes out. No, we had fun the first service. So you ready for 2?
Yes.
I saw you kind of dozing off there a little bit.
I'm so tired.
Wears you out, doesn't it? I always get home on Sunday. She's like, "Why are you so tired?" I'm like, there's a lot of energy to this. But you did a great job first time. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a good job too, babe.
Thank you. Okay, so let's look at these 3 L's. The first one is looking out for one another's interest. So for us, it started very early for us, this first part of it. When we got married, I was still in Bible school, and I had 2 more years of Bible school. We got married after my sophomore year, and Laurie had come to Valley Forge for a semester, and we got engaged. Without going into a lot of the story, there was just some things that had happened in our world. My dad had left the church in upstate New York, and that kind of threw a lot of things into chaos just in our lives and whatnot. So because of where we were at that time, we were going to get married a year later, but we upped the time and we got married in 92 instead of 91 instead of 92. And so Laurie decided to hold off on college, and of course I was 2 years into it and obviously working towards going into the ministry. And so Laurie worked, and she had all of our insurance, and she worked full time. I worked a couple of part-time jobs, but basically during that time Laurie was the breadwinner by a long shot during that first part of our marriage. And she, she was very committed to making sure that I got through college and that, I finished what I had started and that we were able to navigate that and make that work. And then later on in life,
I told him when I was putting him through college, I'm like, I will put you through college. When our babies get to kindergarten, you're going to put me through college. And that's what I did. I went back to college when Sam went to kindergarten. And that meant I worked full-time during the day. I went to college at night. I got home at 11 o'clock at night, and I did my homework until probably midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I got up at like 6 and did it all over again. And so there was no time to do dishes. There was no time to do laundry. And my husband, he took care of me and took care of our kids and made sure their lunches were ready and the laundry was done and the dishes were done. So he looked out for my interests. He cheered me on and said, "You can do it." And that really, because there was days I wanted to quit. I did not want to get my degree. I was so done, and he cheered me on, and he said, "You can do it, babe."
Yeah. And I think part of this looking out for one another's interests is also rooting for each other's success. Now, that seems simplistic, but the reality is a lot of marriages don't do this. Okay? When we're in that courting, dating stage, we're real good at supporting each other and propping each other up, and you can do this and you can be whatever you want. But somewhere along the line, when the rubber meets the road and it becomes our money and not just your money, and I have to give up, or things can become competitive between husband and wife. She makes more than I do, or he, who does he think he is? And this can become a hard part of marriage. And we have to remember in our relationships that we are each other's biggest cheerleader. That when they have a dream or they have a desire, it's our responsibility. Now, there's sometimes when you have to go, "Hey, listen, this is." Like if I had my way, we would sell everything, buy one of those little tiki hut things, and sell, Ray-Bans on some beach someplace, okay? How is this a bad plan? I mean, everything about that just sounds like Jesus to me, okay? So there's some dreams that, it's good for your spouse to go, "No, okay? Ain't happening." And that's, that's part of it, but the majority of the time, we need to be each other's biggest supporter and go, "You know what? You can do this. We can do this together. And whatever dreams, ambitions, hopes that you have, they don't die here." and I'm behind you 100%, and I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to cheer you on. I think that's part of looking out for each other. So,
Can I just say one thing?
no,
Listen, life is so hard out here. Life shouldn't be hard here. And if we've got each other's backs, then it makes life out here a little bit better.
that's true. That's true. So here's what we got to do. We got to make sure that we make our spouse fulfilled spiritually, vocationally, intellectually, emotionally. They should find a safe place in you, spiritually, vocationally, intellectually, and emotionally. They should know that you've got them. They should know that, you know what, if they're having a hard day at work, they don't have a hard day at home, right? They should know that if they're being challenged, you know, there's times when we are just challenged intellectually, you know, instead of saying you can't, you know, you're not, you know, there's people who do that. You're stupid. You're not smart enough. You can't do that. They need to know that they can come and talk to us about those things. And obviously, spiritually, we need to be not only challenging one another, but cheering one another on, and rooting one another on, and supporting one another, and helping each other grow spiritually as well. So the next L is listening, right? Listening to one another. Not just hearing one another, but actually listening to one another. So we have been reading through a book called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. And now we're enjoying this book so much that we've actually made it available for everybody. So they're out here. Bud will be out here after service. They're $14. If you have debit card or credit card, that's all available there. Cash. But most important, we want to get this into your hands, because this is really, we are having a great time as we're going through this book. We didn't even get all the way through it before we wanted to talk about it with you all this morning. But it's really kind of opening up our eyes about some of the ways that we process things and how the other one thinks. And so men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. And that means what for women?
Okay, so women are like spaghetti because if you follow a piece of spaghetti noodle around on a plate, it goes here and there, and it intertwines, and it talks about this, and it goes around, and oh yeah, this, and the kids, and sports, and it keeps going and going, and sometimes it gets on another subject and another subject all the way to the end, and women need to be able to talk all of these things through. That's how we process things. But that's why women are such good multitaskers, because we can handle the kids' activities, we can handle our jobs, our appointments, we can handle all kinds of things, because we think about all kinds of things, because we are like spaghetti.
Yep. And everything's interconnected. Right? So your life, women's lives, everything, just like that piece of spaghetti, it's touching all the other pieces of spaghetti. That's the way women process things, all interconnected. So it'll start off with, you know, how was your day?
And it keeps going and going and going, yes.
Because it's all interconnected, right? The day was, I talked to my mom, I talked to my sister, the boss came in, and this funny story happened over here. Like, where did we get to this story over here? But for a woman, it's interconnected, right? Men, on the other hand, we're like waffles, okay? You know how waffles have the little squares, and those squares don't touch each other? Okay? Those little boxes, that's how we process things. I'm in this box right now. She says, yeah, but I want to talk about this box over here. Aren't they connected? I don't even know where that box is yet. Okay? I'm right here. So I've got to deal with this box. The other day I was driving. I was listening to a book, an audio book, and he said something, and all of a sudden I was in this box. Next thing I know, I was like, oh, I'm driving, and he's still talking. You know, I drifted into the box that all of a sudden I was starting to fix something in my life or work through, you know, something intellectually for myself in that box. I left whatever he was talking about, the big story, and got into this box, jumped in there for a little while, thought about it, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, he's talking about something totally different. That's right, the book's still going here. And that's how we are. Now, one of our favorite boxes, guys, the TV box, right? Women, they think everything's connected, so they just come right in on that box, and we're like, no, I'm watching the game, right? So we talk about this box all the time. Like, honey, can't you stop it? But I'm in this box. I want to stay here for a moment. I want to be here. She's going, no, we're just interconnected because, we were watching something together the other day, and all of a sudden she was talking about, I was like, you just spaghettied me. Like, wow, I'm still here. She's like, well, yeah, but it related. I said, how? And I asked her, I actually stopped, and I said, how did that relate? And she said, they said, da. And that all of a sudden sparked a childhood memory. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm in this box.
And I have to tell you right now, I cannot wait to tell you till the commercial or later.
Yeah. So that's the difference in how we think. Women, it's all interconnected. Men, we're in this spot, this spot, this spot, right? So the other part of this is women, right? You all are working through the solution, all these interconnected things. Guys, hear this. It's not that they don't know how to fix it. This is something I'm learning. It's not that they don't know how to fix it, because we want to jump in and fix it. Okay, stop. Here's what you're going to do, right? And what does your wife say to you? I didn't ask you to fix it, right? All I asked you to do was listen. And you're going, yeah, but I can fix this. She's like, I can fix it. I'm working through this, okay? Let me get there. So guys, we have to step back. We have to step back and let them work through it. And that takes time, because you know what? They have all this stuff connected to it, right? And for women,
we have to work through it, and we have to get to the end, because a lot of times guys will just say, okay, just stop. And what happens then is women get frustrated, and that's where the anger or the tears might come out. So you have to let them finish that thought. I love looking out at your faces. I love that. Yeah, we have to finish. That was a spaghetti. Oh, and stay in the box with your husband. That is also very important as well, because they need to get their thoughts out. And sometimes what we do is, if we trail off and go on another direction and they wanted to open up to us a little bit deeper, we don't get to hear that. So we have to try and stay focused and stay in the box with them.
Goes a lot faster. Does that make sense? Okay. There's a great story. I lost my train of thought that fast. I know. I got pulled out of my box. Okay. There's a couple of really good stories, and I mean literally laugh out loud stories in there about how we process things different. So anyways. Okay. So now, part of this communicating, part of this listening is learning our spouse's language. We don't all speak the same language. Gary Chapman has a great book out called 5 Love Languages. I highly recommend it. And I apologize we didn't make that one available, but you absolutely should get this book, because it's fantastic at figuring out what kind of makes your spouse tick, and what they respond to. And so in this, he gives us 5 different love languages. He says that every one of us has a love language. And it's a way that we give, and it's a way that we receive love. The first one is words of affirmation. So I'll let Laurie take this one.
So words of affirmation is when your spouse, that they need to hear that you love them, that they look nice, that they're doing a good job, where you're just taking time to lift them up, and that's what makes them feel better. Honey, you look great today.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're doing a great job this morning. So my wife and I, we're kind of words of affirmation people a little bit. These aren't our big ones, so, which is fine. But some people, this is a big deal. They need to hear, whether it was their parents or whatever, they need to hear, you're doing a good job. You know what? You're a good husband. You're a good wife. You know what? I really love the kind of father you are. I love the kind of mother you are. I love the kind, they need to hear that. So you need to understand, your spouse, and are they a word of affirmation person. The second one is acts of service. And this is my primary love language. So for me, when my wife makes me a ham and cheese sandwich and brings it to me, like, that's I love you in my love language. That's, so when she was gone this week, and so I washed the dishes, and I folded I did a bunch of loads of clothes for her, and had the living room vacuum because the dog is shedding everywhere right now. And that's my love language. When I like to do stuff. It's even here at the church, I do because I enjoy acts of service. So if your spouse is an acts of service person, when you do something for them, watch what they do. Are they doing things for you all the time? You may say, well, why aren't you talking my language? Why aren't you giving me words of affirmation? But they're doing things for you. They're saying, I love you. This is our second one. The third one is receiving gifts.
Receiving or gift giving. My husband, this is one of his love language as well. When we were first married, he would do little things, bring me little gifts home, bring me flowers, and that I didn't get it then, but it's like, oh, this is how he's showing me he loves me, by giving me gifts, and that is not one of my love languages.
No, it's not. I bought her flowers for years and years and years, and one day my wife just exploded on me. Why are you buying me flowers? I don't like flowers.
They die.
They die! Oh my goodness, okay. So, she was frustrated because I didn't understand her love language. I was trying to speak in my love language, but I wasn't speaking her love language, right? So she wasn't getting the message I was sending, and I was sending the message to the wrong inbox. Okay? The next one is quality time. There's some people who there's some people that when you plan out a good date, you plan out time to be together, you take half a day off and you spend it with them, that's everything to them. Just being together. Going to the grocery store, going to the mall, or going for a walk, going on whatever it is, just time together, that's their love language. Okay? And then the last one is my wife's love language, and that is...
Wait, there is one more thing we want to add to this love language about your children. Every child's love language is time spent. Your children need time with you. They long for their parents' time. That is definitely one of their love languages.
Absolutely.
And the last love language is physical touch, where for me, that is my love language. I will come up, most of you know me, I will come up to you, I will give you a hug. Yes, I love that. So I will say, hey, give me some love, and I'll give you a hug. And that, when I do that, I am giving you my best. You'll know that I am just sharing my heart with you when I share a hug with you.
So sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and there'll be a hand on me. The physical touch one can be a little freaky sometimes. So now the other thing we wanted to point out as well in this listening to one another is how we communicate about our spouse when they're not around is very important. There's a lot of times, and Laurie wanted to talk about this, so let me just say one thing, and then I'll let you talk about this. But how we speak about our spouse to other people is how they'll perceive them. So if you want people to think poorly about your spouse, run them down. Right? And then when they meet them, I've met people that others talk bad about them, and then I meet their spouse, and I'm like, they're nothing like what you described them as. You know, and in the back of my mind, I go, what a horrible way to depict somebody for me. You know, I had a pastor used to say this, we like to take our bullet and put it in other people's guns. Things that, you know, I'm having a problem with my spouse, so I want you to have a problem with them too. And that's not fair to them. They're not there. And that other person doesn't deserve to have a bad perception of Laurie because I'm having a bad day.
And there's so many times you'll be in the office or wherever, and the women stand around and they make it a habit of talking bad about their spouses and laughing at them, and men are so stupid and all of these things. And we need to be the ones to say, no, my husband is awesome, and speak good of him and speak good of our wives. And it really makes people stand back because it's not the norm. It makes them stand back and said, I want a marriage like that. And they see you in a different light, and they want what you have, and it's Jesus that is in you that they're wanting, just even by speaking well of our spouses, because it is not the norm.
Yeah. I think one of the best compliments I ever got was I was at the bus yard a few years ago, and there was a group of us standing around, and I said something about my wife, and I said something good about my wife, and one of the ladies goes, come on, you know, nobody talks about their wife like that. And there was another woman that was there that has become good friends of Laurie's and mine, and she said, no. She said, Paul always talks about his wife like that. She said, I hope I find a man that talks about me the way he talks about Laurie. It's one of the best compliments. You know, I didn't even realize I had done that, quite honestly. But it's one of the best compliments I've ever had, because I want, when people meet my wife, you know, I want them to know that I married up. Because I did. Yeah. He's awake. Okay, let's talk about loving my spouse more than myself, the third L in mutual submission, okay? What does this look like? What does this look like? You know, we can go, okay, yeah, I'd be willing to die for them. If a intruder broke in, I would take the bullet instead. No. What does it look like in practical terms? So I'm going to let my wife unpack this, but there's 4 things, it's in your notes, 4 things that this looks like, loving my wife more than my spouse. The first one is, I'll introduce and then I'll let you talk about it. The first one is pray.
Praying for my spouse. How often do I pray for him? What do I pray over him? That is so important. I pray over my husband, anointing. I pray wisdom. I pray joy. I know his struggles. I know his successes. So I pray, instead of getting angry about those things he may struggle with, it's like, God, you know what? You take care of it. He's in your hands. And just pray those things over them, and protection. So many different things we can be praying over our spouses.
Yeah, I think with that, it's a lot harder to be upset with them when we're praying for them, when we're sincerely praying for them. When we're not just praying, God, fix them, make them fit into what I want them to be, right? You know, right? And it's same thing, you know, her, fix her. You know, she's broken, there's something wrong with her, right? So when we begin to pray over them, pray anointing and pray God's Spirit and pray direction, you know, pray those things into their lives, you know, it's a lot harder to be angry and upset with them. The second one is stop.
How often do we allow ourselves to be interrupted by our spouses? We need to just stop. I love the story. There's a story of a woman, and she is cooking dinner, and she's got the kids, and her day has been hectic, and her husband comes in, you know, and he's just looking to her for that hug or that kiss, and she doesn't even stop. She doesn't even turn around. Our spouses need to know that we prefer them over everybody else, that they are the most important. We need to stop. When they enter a room, do our eyes still light up? For real, you know, it's like, whoa, I can see him across the room and my eyes light up. We need to just stop and let them know that they are still the love of our lives.
Yeah, yeah. Being interrupted, just means that they have priority. They have priority over our schedule. They have priority over, that box that we're in, guys. I mean, I got to preach this to myself, but they have the priority in our lives. We used to tell our kids, they would do the whole, try and pit us against each other thing, right? Remember that? And so the kids would come and I go, I'm telling you right now, that ain't working here, okay? Because guess what? You're going to leave us someday. And I'm stuck with her. Okay? So I'm Team Laurie. I'm not Team Bud. I'm not Team Sam. I'm Team Laurie. Because more than likely, she's going to be the one who closes my eyes when I take the last breath. So, you know what? I'm Team Laurie, right? Nothing's going to interrupt us. But we have the ability to interrupt one another. Does that make sense? Okay, the next one, serve.
When was the last time you selflessly served your spouse for their good rather than the good of yourself? Do we serve them? Do we rub their feet? Do we do all of those little things?
That's 2 services she said she's going to rub my feet. Right? You guys heard that? She said that first service too, didn't she, Chris?
I didn't say whose feet are being rubbed.
You got to live by example.
How well do we serve them? Jesus washed the disciples' feet. That's all I'm going to say. Right?
Listen, I'm down with it. Yeah, are we serving one another? Right? Or do we just do to get? Right? How many times do we go, you know what I did? You're supposed to. Why, when's my turn? Right? Selfless is, I serve. What do I get out of it? I don't know. Just serving them. The last one is evaluate.
Ask yourself, how well am I loving my spouse? It is so, I try to self-evaluate even in my job, all of the different areas of my life, because if I'm self-evaluating myself, then God doesn't have to come and say, Laurie, you're not doing this. Or someone else doesn't have to discipline me when I'm not doing something I should be. And I want my marriage to be at its best all the time. So, and that's how I do it. I evaluate. I kiss my husband goodnight every night? Have I waited on him? Am I making his favorite dinners? Have I done the things that he likes? Just look inward, and because if you look inward, there is no need for you to be fixed.
Yeah, yeah. And, along with this, I think part of this is we are great at evaluating the other person. He's not, she's not, why aren't they? We are constantly, you should be. Why aren't you? I'm not getting because of you. If you would just fix, right? But when we turn that around and we begin to go, what am I failing at? Am I meeting her needs? Does she feel secure? Does she know that she can trust me even when I'm not around? Or she's not around, excuse me. Does she know that I have her best interests at heart? Am I providing for her emotionally, physically, financially? Am I taking good care of her? Am I the kind of husband she would be proud to have? I'm evaluating, because what we tend to do is we go, you know what, you. Got a great evaluation of your side of the marriage. If you've been here for very long and you've ever heard me talk about marriage before, you've heard me say this. If you will work on you, guess what happens? Your marriage gets 50% better. Jesus' job is to work on her, not my job. Okay? So I evaluate myself and let Jesus evaluate her. I take care of me and let Jesus take care of her. He's so much better at it, right? When I try to be the Holy Spirit to my wife, I fail at it. And all I do is I build walls of separation between us instead of bridges to her heart. So evaluation is a big part of it. So we're going to wrap this up. Laurie had a couple of thoughts that I wanted her to share with you as we begin to wrap this up this morning.
So as I look back at our marriage and self-evaluate, and one of my biggest regrets that I feel, I wasted so much time wanting to be right and fighting instead of loving. I look back, it's like, we'll get mad and I'll just not talk for a day,
Whoa. You've never not talked for a day. I gotta correct that. I gotta correct that right here. I won't talk for a day. Laurie talks for a day.
Okay, so anyways, I feel, I'm like, God, I wasted so much time being mad over stupid stuff, when really I would love to go back and just love him the way I should have. And now I'm fixing those type of things. It's like, okay, is this worth it? Is this worth me being angry about? God, I just want us to have fun and laugh together and love all the time and not be angry and waste time. And also, as I look back at our past 27 years, and now my children are married, and I'm watching them and how closely they must have watched us, because I'm looking at Sam acting like I used to act, or how Bud acts like his dad acted, and I'm like, sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. So be very careful how you are with your marriages, because your children are watching closer than you think. And if you want their marriages to be their very best, then you need to make your marriage the very best, because they watch how you fight, they watch how you communicate, and they pattern their marriages after your marriage. So parents, be careful what you say, be careful what you do, because they are watching you.
Yeah. And they, along with that, I think it's important to kind of look at your marriage and say, would I want my kids to have my marriage? Now, let me preface that by saying this. You're not going to have the perfect marriage, okay? It doesn't exist, okay? There's going to be, it's two different people coming together. So there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be disagreement, and you're not going to get it right all the time. As a matter of fact, I used to tell my kids all the time, every kid goes to, they go to therapy because of their parents, okay? So just get over it, okay? You're going to go to therapy because of us, because we're not perfect, and that's just the way it is, right? Our parents were perfect, we're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect, and that's life, okay? So but that doesn't mean we throw our hands up and give up, okay? What it does mean is this: listen, if you want your kids to have a good marriage, let them see you striving to have a good marriage. You may not get it right all the time, but you know what? Let them see that you're working at it. Let them see that you're trying to be better every day. Let them see the mistakes. And you know what, moms and dads? The best thing you can do for your kids is apologize to your kids, okay? That's one of the things we got right. Every so often, we just come to our kids and go, you know what? You shouldn't have seen that. I was wrong. And I'm sorry you saw that. I'm sorry that I did that. I'm sorry I acted that way. I'm sorry I let my frustration get the best of me. Or I'm sorry that you had to hear something from our past that's none of your business. That's a whole nother sermon right there. You know what? Your past isn't your kids' business. They don't need to know your history. That's your business. That's not theirs. Don't put that on them. Okay? You see what I'm saying? Let them see that you're striving to get it right. And you're not going to make it, but you're working at it, and that you're committed to each other. So if we want to have a marriage that lasts the long haul, we have to have these 3 L's, right? We're looking out for one another's interests. We're listening, not just hearing. We're listening to one another, and we're using those 5 love languages. We're finding out what our spouse's love language is, and we're talking it, right? And then we're loving our spouse more than ourselves, which means, you know what, we're going after this, and we're putting them first, and we're making sure that they succeed in everything that they do. So here's the deal this morning. Remember that marriage isn't two people that are completing one another. Remember the old movie, You Complete Me? That isn't her job to complete me. That's Jesus' job. Okay? We complement one another. We're not completing one another. And so I can't be everything she needs, and she can't. She's imperfect. I'm imperfect. I can't expect her to complete the areas. Jesus is perfect. He's completing me. Laurie isn't. And so I have to give her grace, and she has to extend grace to me. But what we are two imperfect people, right, who refuse to give up on each other. We're two imperfect people. We have good days, we have bad days, but we refuse to give up on each other. No matter how bad it is, no matter how bad the situation is, no matter how bad everything is going, it's all burning down around us, but you know what? We're good because we're in it together. And we're not here fighting against each other, we're fighting with each other. I love the picture of two husband and wife back to back. Everything else is coming against them, and they're just fighting everything else off. To me, that's a great sign of marriage. We're fighting with each other, but we're not fighting against each other, right? So let me tell you this. If your love seems to have died in your relationship, the easy thing to do is go, I'm out. I'm done. I give up. I quit. I'm not getting what I want. That's what more than 50% of marriages are doing today. I'm not getting, this isn't working for me, so I'm good. You good? Yeah, let's go. No. How about this? How about instead you lean into these 3 L's? You give them a chance. You really start to communicate and talk and work with each other. Put them first. Put their best interests first. Cheer them on. And let God do the rest. Okay, so next Sunday, we're going to talk about wives submitting to their husbands. So guys, bring your pen and pencil. But don't forget, where did Paul start? Mutual submission. Mutual submission. So we're going to unpack what it really means that wives are to submit to their husbands. Would you stand with me? We'll give our benediction this morning. Can we say thank you to BJ and Shannon for helping us out this morning? We're sorry, folks. We told Becky to go into labor today, so she just, what are you going to do with her? Here's what Paul says. This is our benediction. In the chapter just before the chapter that we're reading for him in Ephesians chapter 5, here's what Paul says. He says, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. Lord, I pray that you would protect our hearts and our marriages. I pray that you would continue to help us to love our spouses the way that you love us, through mutual submission, through unconditional love, and through a determination that no matter what, we're in this, better or worse, rich or poor, till death do us part. Bless our week, we pray. In Christ's name.